in your final year. What I'm going to specify would be on the writing of literature review in the research article. All right, so that's the focus of my presentations this afternoon time. So what is basically literature review? I think every one of you knows what it is. So it is basically a structured discussion of existing research related to a topic. So as you have already mentioned, when it comes to writing a literature review, we'll have some theories to write, we'll have previous studies to also write in this section. Why it is important? Because it is a venue, it is a section for you to show your understanding about the topic you are writing. For example, your research topic is about academic writing in English. So what you will write in this section would be about what academic writing is, how to write academic writing, and so on and so on. So that's the reason why a literature review section is basically about you guys demonstrating your understanding about the topic you are writing. All right. So what I have in my mind now is that every one of you have already at least one research article journal, and then from there you study that in research article in general, we will have the introduction section, literature review section, okay, and then the method, finding, discussion, and conclusion. So what we are discussing now is the second section, which is the literature review. All right. And again, back to this slide, what is literature review? It's basically about theory and previous studies that you combine, that you discuss, that you put together in the sections of literature review in a research article. All right. So what is the function? Why it is important, again, to write the literature review section in a research article? First, the very first is about the contextualizations of your research. So people won't understand or will not understand what the topic is all about without you write about this topic in chapter 2. So that's why you put like theories. If you read again the literature review sections in the research article that you've downloaded, you will notice that there are theories, there are previous studies that are put together by the writer or by the author. All right. Why it is so? Because it is to contextualize the research problem. All right. And in the literature review, we also indicate the significance of the study. All right. So we'll indicate the gaps. We'll show to the readers that the previous studies have indicated gaps. That's why this research is important to study. It's basically highlighted as well in the introduction section, but the main point of doing or writing the literature review sections is actually to show your research gaps. I mean, why the research is important to be conducted. So there are theories, there are previous studies that are put together. Okay. And if you back again to the journal that you've downloaded, there are types of literature review. Okay, there are ways to organize a literature review. But what is common is this one, systematic and thematic review. But if you ask me which one that is easier for you to follow, I think this thematic review will be highly recommended. In your research article, again, you may have like in your literature review, you have like theme A and then subtopics, and then theme B and then subtopic. For example, English academic writing, that's the theme, and then there is smaller section. Okay, that's what we call as thematic review, and that is one that I would highly recommend when you do your final project for this study. So sorry, for this course. All right. The key components of the introduction sections, of the literature review sections, as you have already studied in the journal that you've downloaded, is basically about like introducing the topic. You start with telling your readers what theories are informing this study, and then what previous studies are used to also inform this study. And within this, there is also something called thematic organizations. As I've already explained, that you guys write a literature review mostly through the progressions of theme, like starting from theme A with the subtopics or sub-theme, and then theme B, and then subtopic. Okay, but the easiest way to understand how a literature review is written, because this course is not about research, but this course is about writing research, writing research, or research writing, or academic writing focus on research report. Your focus is not on the research itself, but mostly on how this literature review is written. So my evaluations or my assessments in the final exams or midterm exam would not be too much on the research itself, but on how you write the research article. So what we are doing is that to understand in depth how each section is written. Last time we concentrated on how the introduction section was written, and this time we are focusing on how the literature review is written. All right? I hope you got my point. And the organization strategies, I will not explain one by one, but again, I will be focusing on the thematic. And this will be one that I will suggest to you when you write your final examination, which is in the form of research article writing. All right. So the thematic would be, as I have already mentioned before, start with the big theme and then sub-themes or subtopic, and then subtopic. All right. I can further elaborate when you really want to know more about this, but I think you've already understood that thematic means you start with the big theme, and then there is like sub-theme, and then you explain, and so on and so on. I'll make it quick because I want more discussion with you. All right. So we have the synthesis versus summary. So in the literature review, basically you do both summarizing and synthesizing. What we mean by summary is that you summarize, the theories that are used in your study. And then when it comes to synthesizing, the easiest example to take will be like you are, combining previous studies and then you discuss them. Like study A, study A, study B, study C, and then you tell what the differences or similarities between the studies that you put in the literature review section. All right. And what is important again when it comes to writing the literature review is basically on, indicating your critical evaluation. You are not simply writing down what previous researchers have already found, but also you put the critical evaluation in your writing or in your literature review writing. So the easiest way or the shortcut to the understanding of research article writing in general is that to do a genre analysis. A genre analysis means you are focusing on each section and then focus or concentrate on how each section is written. Yeah. For example, when it comes to introduction writing, in our previous meeting, we studied about how it is organized and then what verbs are mostly used, okay, or the linguistic features like how it is written, what is in paragraph 1, what is in paragraph 2, and how is paragraph 1 written, how is paragraph 2 written, what kind of verb is used, is it reporting verb, and so on and so on. So genre analysis means we learn each section by understanding how it is organized and what linguistic features are used. For example, in the introduction, are we using verb 1 or simple past? Simple present or simple past? So through our genre analysis, we find that most of the introduction sections of research articles are using simple present. Okay, while for example in the literature review, we combine, for example, between simple past because we refer to previous studies and simple present. So that's what we mean by doing genre analysis. So genre analysis is basically about understanding how each section in a research article is written. Okay. So by language features, I'm referring to, for example, the use of reporting verbs. So for example, you will see in chapter 2 that most of verbs used would be like to argue or argues, to suggest or suggests, claims, and so on. And then hedging is also one thing that you will find in literature review as well as in the discussion. Okay, for example, if you find the word may, might, appears, and so on, that is called as hedges. All right, so hedges is to indicate tentativeness. For example, rather than saying this means, you can also say this may mean that. So that is hedges. Okay, so you can consult ChatGPT with this term and then ask ChatGPT examples of hedges and then functions of hedges in in the academic writing in general. What I'm doing now is actually highlighting in order that you guys have the word first and then you explore further in order to gain much better understanding about its term. And what I'm now explaining is basically about hedging. And cohesive devices, like academic writing is very much different from conversational English. So if we are using English in our daily conversation, we are using conversational English. But when it comes to academic writing, we'll be concentrate on the use of academic English. And one of the typical of academic writing is the use of cohesive devices like conjunction. Like however, similarly, in contrast, and so on. So cohesive devices are devices that are normally used and will always be used in any academic writing. So you will not be surprised when you are reading academic writing, you find the use of more cohesive devices in order to link between one paragraph to another paragraph. And most of the common problems, especially for you, anak-anak S1 ya, who are still like, what is basically research articles? What is basically academic writing? Well, that's something common when anak-anak S1 like yourself, mahasiswa S1 like yourself, find like problems in academic writing. No, we have ChatGPT, I know, but you really have to have a good knowledge about academic writing in order to be able to write well. Because when ChatGPT helps you to write, you still need to make sure that it is written properly. I mean, the text that you ask to ChatGPT to produce or to generate is a text that, according to your knowledge of academic writing, is a good one. All right. So without now having the knowledge about academic writing, you cannot assess what ChatGPT produces for you. You may send me a rubbish actually. Okay. For example, you ask ChatGPT to write the summary for you, but then because you don't know what summary is and what a good summary is and how an academic writing should be, then you send me a rubbish because you don't evaluate that. I mean, the text that is generated by ChatGPT, you don't evaluate it because you don't know, the knowledge about, you don't have the knowledge about the academic writing, the good academic writing of English. So the common problem, for example, you are over summarizing in literature review. You keep summarizing, but you don't put your critical thinking there. You don't write critically. While academic writing is basically an example of critical writing. All right, and because you don't know how each section, like introductions, is written, literature review is written, then your organizations is poor. All right, so
Beneran nggak
you
sih,
don't
Wai?
know how to organize your tasks. You don't know, like, after introduction, you will have, for example, literature review. After literature review, you have the method, finding, discussions, and the conclusion. All right? Because you don't have the knowledge about how it is organized, then you fail, to write a proper research article. So that's why I asked you to do genre analysis to check how the structure of the research article and then how it is written.
Genre.
All right,
Genre.
and so on and so on. You can read.
Kedengeran
screen, like weak link to research question, limited critical analysis. And I believe you have a lot of actually questions in mind about literature review writing. But what I can highlight is that in order to understand the writing of each section in research article, including literature review, do genre analysis. This is what I basically want you guys to do. So you can do independently. All right. So what I mean by do independently is that because you have already printed the journal with you, or you have the journal that you have downloaded, what you will do is doing genre analysis. Understand how each section is written. That's the point. All right. So that's basically what I want to explain. I know that we have a lot of devices now to consult in order to improve your knowledge about writing a literature review in a research article. So after this meeting, what I'm expecting is that first you consult with Google's or ChatGPT, Gemini, and other AI about how actually a research article in general is written, how introduction is written, how literature review section is written, method is written, and then you will have the complete knowledge about research article writing for you guys to complete your final examinations, which is in the project of, in a form of research project, and you write the report in the form of research article. I believe you've done this, but we'll sharpen this knowledge by redo what you probably have done before, which is writing a research article, which is a typical of university student of this age. Okay, so that's what I can present in this quick session. And what I will ask you to do is to make a written summary of what I have already presented. And of course, you can enrich what you knowledge, what you know about academic, literature review writing from your previous reading. 700 will be the minimum number of words, and then put in the G drive and make sure that next week it is already there, so you have the portfolio of the whole assignments in that G drive link that I've already had. You just need to add, every assignment there. I will not share this first until you send me the summary. Okay. If I send this now, you can just attach this to ChatGPT and ChatGPT produce it for you.
Okay.
What I'm expecting is that you guys really write the summary based on what you learned from today's session. All right. I'll stop now and I'll get back to you for a quick discussion on what we have already learned about literature review writing.
What is this?
Oke, boleh dalam bahasa Indonesia, boleh dalam bahasa Inggris. Cerita sedikit apa yang didapat dari yang tadi saya sampaikan.